Welcome back. We are joined again by Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a decorated combat veteran and author and former advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Thank you for coming back on the program. I see now that Trump and Netanyahu has met in the White House. Trump appears to have expressed some concerns about the impacts on energy markets and the global economy of the Iran war, while Netanyahu appears to be pushing the idea that it's unlikely that a deal can be made with Iran. So what is necessary is more pressure through, economic pressure, but also military strikes. I was wondering, is there anything to be made of this meeting? Did it have any significance, or was this essentially the path we're still on?
Well, what we're hearing in terms of comments are what we refer to in English as boilerplate comments. We're not hearing anything that is particularly informative. I would say that we could reach sort of two or three conclusions. The first, unfortunately, is that Trump has once again decided not to decide anything when it comes to Ukraine. He listened to Zelensky. Obviously, he was told by his handlers that he should. He did. And they seem to have had an amicable meeting during which Zelensky wants to license the production of Patriot missiles in Ukraine, which will never happen. But by the time they did that, Ukraine won't exist anymore, in my estimation. And Trump indulged all of that nonsense and sort of waved goodbye. He's not going to stop the Congress from wasting money and time on Ukraine. So he's just not going to decide anything. It's disappointing, but I think this is something the Russians have become accustomed to. When you turn to Netanyahu showed up and I think privately said what he's always said. Now, today in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article about a 2-week plan that has been developed by Admiral Cooper that would result in another massive missile and bombing campaign that would theoretically have different results. And we continue to hear rumors about the use of ground forces, particularly against Karg Island and potentially Chabahar on the south coast of Iran. So I think whatever disagreements they may have had, I don't think there's any change in the larger direction strategically. And I have this sinking feeling that we are going to be attacking very shortly in a big way.
Well, some of these attacks, though, it appears that the escalation control is not quite there. You've seen the attacks on Iraq. I mean, this can have a lot of unforeseen consequences. The involvement of Yemen now in the war as well is deeply problematic. But, especially the folks, there's a lot of countries involved here. But which is it that concerns you the most now? I thought that the Iraq one, I think, is underestimated how bad this can go. But again, I'm not the expert here.
Well, I think we can conclude that a couple of things are underway. One of which is this is a regional war now. This is no longer limited to Israel and Iran and the United States. It has spilled over into, as you point out, Iraq. The Popular Mobilization Forces there, the PMF, are very loyal to the Iranians that stood by them through the Civil War and virtually from the beginning of our intervention and occupation. They have their eyes on Kuwait, frankly. I think Kuwait will cease to exist when this war ends. It'll become part of Iraq. I also think that this war is spreading even to places that we're not paying attention to. There was a refinery in Egypt that was badly damaged by an unmanned system. We're not quite sure where it came from. That could have come from Iraq or any number of places. Could have come from the Houthis. Al-Ansara is now in control of the access to the Red Sea. Iran controls access to the Persian Gulf. This basically is a clear and unambiguous message that the United States Navy no longer controls either of those, and for that matter, is no longer the dominant force that it claimed to be. I think the second piece, and this is the most important part, and this is what I think troubles Trump more than anything else. The loss of control over the flow of oil, the destruction of the global energy complex, those things are important. But to Donald Trump personally and to his inner circle, what's at stake right now is the survival of American military, political, and economic hegemony. That's what it's all about. You'll recall all these silly remarks about the rules-based liberal international order. Well, that thing was concocted in the aftermath of Bretton Woods and the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, the instrumentalities that were supposed to be helpful and good for people in the world, and people bought that for a while, and they finally realized, as Charles de Gaulle predicted, that everything that was being developed was really a Trojan horse for American hegemonic power. Well, that's true. And what has happened over the last 30 years, as the Russians have noted and others, is that this hegemonic power expanded. And it's reached a point of intolerability. In other words, people just won't tolerate it anymore. And the acid test for this military hegemony has been Iran. And the United States Armed Forces thus far have lost. And so for all intents and purposes, the world has concluded that the world they lived in of American military, political, and economic hegemony is over. So what is Trump really doing? Trump at this point is really fighting a rearguard action. He's trying to save whatever he can of this hegemony. The reason he went back to war after signing the MOU is that he finally realized, look, the MOU is unambiguous surrender of U.S. military hegemony. I can't afford that. I can't allow it to happen. Now you have all sorts of people saying, well, if this is allowed to stand, if we cannot defeat Iran, then others will challenge us. And years ahead, we will be targets. Iran will strike us, and all this kind of crap. The possibility that most of the world will get on with itself, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere without us, doesn't seem to occur to anybody. We are now continuing to weaponize our economy, our financial system, sanctions upon sanctions directed at China, sanctions upon sanctions directed at Iran or directed at Russia, anybody that we don't like who challenges us. It's a dead end, Glenn. So I think we are rapidly approaching a turning point. Now, whether it's a turning point or we're just reaching entropy, I don't know. But if you look at the Russians right now, contrary to what people are saying in the West, they are advancing. And the Russian military is stronger today than at any time since the 1980s. More and more forces are being mobilized, trained, and equipped. And the Russian forces are now effectively blockading Odessa and Mykolaiv ports, shutting that off, turning what remains of Ukraine into a landlocked area. And Kiev is justifiably concerned that these so-called fortress cities are going to fall shortly. And that effectively opens the path to Dnipro, Kharkov, and Kiev. So Zelensky is worried. His government is decomposing, firing people left and right, people resigning, leaving. And at the same time, we've actually privately said to the Russians we'd like to talk, and apparently Minister Lavrov has said no thanks, because he sees no evidence that we're really interested in bringing an end to the war. Then you turn to Israel. Israel is very happy that we abandoned the June Memorandum of Understanding. They simply want to keep the war going as long as possible, because theirs is a war to the finish. They're in an existential war in their judgment, and they're correct right now. They've turned it into an existential war for Israel. Either they can exterminate and annihilate their enemies all over the region or not. They have complete control of us for the moment, and so they're confident that that can still be achieved. I'm not so sure it can, but that's what they think. And as long as we are obedient and do what they tell us to do, I guess you could say they're going to continue. So we're in for another massive air and missile strike scenario, another offensive. And the White House remains what I would call an Israeli or Jewish lobby policy-making center. And so that's why I say Trump listened, and I think Trump is going to obey. At the same time, we're still in a fight with the Chinese. Now, the potential for war there has receded. Everyone, months ago announced that we didn't have enough missiles and enough capability to attack China, and if we did, we'd lose it. For some reason, nobody bothered to say the same was true for Iran. This is a catastrophic outcome for Trump. And the other thing that Trump, I don't think, is aware, maybe he is, but we're now beginning to see the emergence of a new axis. We talk about these axes all the time. Well, there's only one axis in the West and the Middle East. That's the Israeli-American axis. But when you look east, you have a growing axis that I would say consists of Russia, China, Iran, and I would add Turkey. Because even though the Turks have not yet engaged, they are on the very edge of doing so. And the population there is overwhelmingly in support of striking back against this Israeli-American axis in the Middle East. I think Erdogan has waited as long as he possibly can and will continue to wait, but he wants to be in on the end. It's sort of like the Battle of Waterloo, which was largely a German affair with a few British troops, contrary to popular belief. Prussians, Hanoverians, and Germans from everywhere. And of course, the British. And then suddenly at the end, imagine the Austrians and the Russians and others showing up. Well, I think that will be Turkey at the end of this thing. Because Iran had to do two things. The first was survive. It's done that. It's demonstrated it cannot be destroyed. And it's going to continue to attack because the second goal for Iran, having survived, and they weren't sure that they would. They spent 20, 30 years preparing, but they were never completely sure. Now they know they're going to survive, is to drive the American military presence completely out of the region. And that's going to happen because we can't protect our own bases, let alone any of our partners. So that's going to be achieved. And at that point, this new axis that I just described is going to dominate. It's going to dominate the Middle East. It's going to dominate Eastern Europe, perhaps Western Europe, because people in Western Europe are looking at this and saying, well, why should we sign up for the United States? It's no longer the leading economic power. It no longer has the same political influence. Financially, it's brought us to ruin. We're part of this Western scam, recirculate all the dollars back through New York City, fund our massive debt so that we can continue to live well. Europeans are saying, what are we doing this for? And then finally, there's the military dimension. Europeans are beginning to question their governments because they're unsure about this Russian threat. And they should be unsure about it because it's not real, as we know. But I guess the possibility that you could end up in a nuclear confrontation with China, Pakistan, and Russia, let alone a confrontation that would also include Turkey and Iran, these things don't seem to really enter into discussion in the White House. And I think that's because right now, everything that is being done in the White House, everything that's being done on the Hill, is seen through the lens of the Israel lobby and the fight for Jewish supremacy in the Middle East, as well as in the United States and the West.
Yeah, no, definitely that's the impression you got from the meeting as well with Trump and Netanyahu, because everything kind of was framed a bit around how it benefits Israel. For one, Netanyahu apparently showed a map to Trump, complaining that Turkey controls 50 times more territory in Syria than Israel, and essentially this is not fair. They want their larger spoils of war. And also with this nuclear deal between the United States and Saudi Arabia, Trump had apparently reassured Netanyahu that this would depend on Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel. But again, this would put some proliferation pressures on Iran as well. So it looks as if a lot of poor decisions are being made to serve Israel. But how stable is now the situation for the Israelis? Because there's a lot of this reeks of desperation.
Well, of course it does. It's kind of interesting, though, because it's very reminiscent of the meeting in January of 1941 between Molotov and Hitler in Berlin. Molotov requested the meeting and came in with Stalin's demands. Not Stalin's recommendations or requests, Stalin's demands. Stalin demands control of the Bosporus, control of the Dardanelles. Stalin demands control of these areas in Romania and Bulgaria that adjoin the Dardanelles. Stalin demands control of Finland, you know. And Hitler sort of sat there and said, my God, these people are crazy. They're threatening the whole world. And it was a very unsatisfactory meeting. Now, subsequently, some smart people on the German general staff tried to make the point that let Stalin do what he likes. If he does that, he'll be at war with the British Empire and everyone else because they can't accept these things. And that would work to our advantage. But foolish Hitler said, no, we have to defend civilization, the West, against the Soviets. Imagine that. The rest is history. You got a war. The problem I have with this meeting that you're just describing is that Zelensky and Netanyahu are joined at the hip. They're both supported by the same groups of people. You know, let's be frank, the same groups of people that want to essentially denude the populations of the Middle East of Muslim Arabs and Christian Arabs and replace them with Jews are the same people that want to do something similar to Russia. So they are backing the Ukraine mess. And the bad news is that we don't seem to want to recognize that, and we're not willing to stand up to it because those same forces own everyone. Literally. I mean, how do you turn to people that have given you hundreds of millions of dollars, who have enriched you, who've helped you to win elections, who've kept you in power, kept you in office, even though their policies, many of them are really distasteful, both domestically as well as in foreign policy? I don't know. But I fear that this meeting is going to lead to a widening of the war, just as the meeting in January of 41 led to catastrophe. I think these meetings in Washington did not solve any problems. It didn't take us off the path of disaster. It's keeping us on it. And all we have to do is look at the global energy complex and look at the global economy, and we know that all of those things are plunging into the abyss. You know, people here in the United States, and I think in Europe, don't realize we haven't even begun to feel the effects of the disrupted energy complex. It's going to get a lot worse. I look at the situation in Germany. VW is essentially committing Harry-Kari. It's on a suicidal path. I don't know how the German government can survive. This is a bad situation. And instead of leading us out of it, which is what Washington under Trump was supposed to do, we're marching right into it. So I don't, it's not so much that Trump is making any decisions. It's his failure to make the right decisions and extending these policies that will bring disaster to us and to Europe and to the Middle East.
Well, on that topic, though, the energy crisis, again, this is something that Trump brought up in his meeting with Netanyahu, but he also cited a concern about energy and global economy as the reason why he signed the MOU, which he then walked away from, well, pretty much as he signed it. But now, of course, the issue of Hormuz has not been solved. It's not going to be solved. It seems we can add the Red Sea on top of this just to make it even more complicated. And we see these Saudi energy facilities being struck. And, you can add a lot of other crises on top of there. But energy prices don't seem to reflect the dire realities that you speak of. Again, I'm not contesting what you're saying. I'm just trying to make sense of how to understand the energy price, because it doesn't really make much sense. We can watch on TV the energy fields in Saudi Arabia burning at the same time. The oil prices are dropping. I'm just wondering, how do you make sense of this?
Well, there's a yawning gap between reality and fantasy in Wall Street. Wall Street is accustomed to manipulation. Remember, everything is financialized for Wall Street. You don't have people in Wall Street who've ever been to drilling rigs. You don't have people in Wall Street who have visited any refineries. If you ask one of them, how many refineries do we have today? How many refineries did we have 30 years ago? They have no idea. They don't see a problem. And the White House, thanks to the leadership of Trump and his inner circle of advisors, has been very effective at manipulating oil prices. But we know, for instance, that the cost of oil coming off a ship right now is about $140 a barrel. But that's not the paper price. This is all going to change. In other words, what you have right now, what's the right word? We talk about latency in communications in the military. That, as a result of the structure of your communications, orders or information or intelligence take time to arrive at a location. It's not instantaneous. Well, that's what you're dealing with right now in the oil market. So if you listen to Jeff Curry or somebody like Pilkington and others who have years of experience in the oil industry, they're all saying the same thing. Yeah, you're right. The reality hasn't caught up yet, but it will. And when it catches up this time around, it's going to be awful. Weeks ago we said, well, if President Trump steps out of this or puts an end to it, there's a chance we could get out of this with minimal damage. Two or 3 years, we could return to normalcy. But where we're headed right now, it'll be a decade or more. And everything is going to change. I mean, when you listen to the Iranians and others in the Middle East who are fundamentally opposed to us in Israel, they all say the same thing. Sykes-Picot is over. In other words, the structures of the past that were formulated at the end of the First World War are going away. We're going to live in a new Middle East, and it's not going to be one dominated. It's not going to be the Greater Israel Project. It's not going to be the United States. It's going to be indigenous. And the two great powers that are going to shape these things and decide these things are not the United States and Israel. They're primarily Iranians and Turks because they live there, but also Chinese and Russians, the Chinese especially, because they're the only country in the world that can help rebuild anything. We're broke. We're on the edge of a total financial meltdown. It's like a lot of things. You and I stand at the railroad crossing and we look out and we say, see, look over there. The train is coming. The locomotive is coming. And everybody says, oh, yeah, you've been saying that for the last 6 hours. It hasn't gotten here yet. Yeah, but we can see it now. It's visible. It's coming. Yeah, right. Fine. Yeah, wake me when it arrives. Well, it's going to arrive, Glenn. So, you can replay this at some point in the future. And the people that all said, oh, I'm crazy, Curry's crazy, all these other experts are crazy, all these other military analysts are crazy, replay it. And everybody will reel in shock. Well, why didn't we do something? That will be the question. Well, the man who has to do something is named Donald Trump. And it's not a question of what he's doing. It's a question of what he's failing to do. He's just decided not to decide. And that's why you get this vacillation every other day. I'm going to destroy them. I'll hit every bridge. Okay. What difference does that make? What are you going to do? Destroy every hospital? What's your plan? What targets are going to be so important? Are you going to, we're going to seize Carg Island. Oh, that'll be good. Great. Yeah. What are all those soldiers on Carg Island going to do as they sit under constant bombardment from the Iranians? It'll be an exercise in suicide and certain death. Okay. Well, then we'll destroy Carg Island. Okay. Now what? There's no sense of this whole thing makes no sense. And the intelligent thing to do is to stop it. There's not going to be a public surrender by us or by Iran. He's just going to have to disengage. And he will. He'll disengage. But not until the 11th hour and not until it's too late. And only when the economy here at home is awful and is really profoundly affecting everyone in Washington. That's coming. It's absolutely certainly coming.